Perfect. Yeah, we got it. Okay, it looks like we are live. Let me double check um, on our
I'll
scroll
smile just
here
in
just to make
case.
sure it pops up. Maybe, I don't know. This is what's so funny is I'm always double checking like, is it that yeah, it says I'm live. Which
Yeah,
means people are looking at us like, boy, these guys can't get their stuff together. They're supposed to be professionals.
that awkward moment. I've learned to like have a nice face on during that little period of time. Otherwise, they get me like the grumpy, I'm staring at my computer face. Like,
Right?
lie?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and of course, on the other side, they're like, "They're late. They're 10 minutes late." So they're refreshing the screen and they're frustrated too. All right, this is perfect. So we've got our microphone situation sorted out. Thank you so much, gang, for tuning in for episode number 61 of Talking About Horses. I'm really pleased today to be joined by my friend Karen Rolf. Hey, gang. Karen became one of the youngest riders in the US to train her own horse to FEI. She later attended a natural horsemanship clinic and saw great results applying these concepts with her dressage horses. The next years were spent immersing in natural horsemanship. She then took her knowledge and skills and created her unique system that she calls Dressage Naturally so she could share it with others. She believes in getting to the heart of our mental, emotional, and physical partnership with our horses by bringing together the best of the worlds of dressage and partnership based training. Karen, thank you so much for joining me again for an episode of Talking About Horses.
No, thank you so much for asking me. It's always great to chat with you, Patrick.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. So, that was kind of a brief introduction for you right there. For our listeners that don't know, who is Karen Rolf? Can you give us kind of the elevator speech there? Tell us a little bit more about, who you are. What is it that you do? And I'm interested in what got you started with horses in the first place, and then that mixing of dressage and natural horsemanship.
Yeah, yeah. So you want me to go way back? Yeah. So
Way
I
back, all the
think
way.
I don't know. The horses were in my genes somehow because I don't remember a time when I ever wasn't like thinking about horses, drawing horses. The joke in my family is my first words were, I want a horse.
Oh,
Then mom and dad. Yeah. So, just horse camp. My mom had a horse for a little bit when I was a little kid for like a year. So I got time with there. And then, when I was a kid, I got a horse. And then I just never stopped. I'm sure my parents thought I was going to outgrow it, but I just didn't. And then after university, when people are like, hey, will you pay me to ride my horse? I'm like, why don't I just do that? So I just really followed my bliss. And yeah, this one horse that I had when I was a kid, it was my second horse, off the track thoroughbred with an old bowed tendon. Um, didn't pass the pre-purchase for dressage, but like I was a kid, who wants to do dressage?
right.
Did pony club, and but it was that horse that ended up going all the way up the levels and represented the United States 4 times on the young rider team, and it was that horse who just kind of kept going, that led me to be professional dressage trainer for many years, working alongside and under and alongside Ann Gribbons. And
Okay.
yeah, so it was with her for decades. She trained me, and then I was a trainer at her farm. And, I just got so much experience riding so many horses of all different, I hate the word quality levels, but, ones that went to the
Hmm.
Olympics and, ones
Yeah.
that didn't. uh, yeah. And just in that progression, there was a period of time when I didn't have my own horse anymore and just was riding
Okay.
other people's horses. And during that time, like Anne and I used to joke of like how special my horse Brave Tom was, who had all these strikes against him. We were just alone in the bushes training by ourselves. And he did all this stuff. And now we were working, with all these fancy, high quality, talented horses. And, the joke was like, how come they weren't as generous as Brave Tom was?
Ah,
It was like,
yeah. And
yeah,
Brave Tom was the off the track thoroughbred.
yeah, yeah, and it was
Okay.
like, wow, Brave Tom really was special. He really was special. And then later on, one of someone at the farm died and actually willed me her horse, and her horse just happened to be a very shut down, used up upper level dressage horse, you know the type, just
Mhm.
as close to an inanimate object as you could get. He was sweet, but he
Mm.
just was like shut down. And so
Yeah.
anyway, he became my horse. And so I did, what I do with horses. And when he started getting older and less sound, and I was at a training facility. I'm like, gosh, his life is kind of boring. And it was my horsey.
Mm.
So that's where I kind of stumbled across a natural horsemanship clinic. I was a Prelly clinic taught by David Lichman. And
Okay.
it just was like, this looks like fun. I was looking for silly stuff to do with horses. And that was the first moment that things started to change, because some of the things that David Lichman was teaching me started to make these changes in this horse who was
Mm.
retired at the end of his career, been there, done that, and he started coming to life. And I was like, wait a
Mm.
minute. And I ended up riding him and doing stuff with him for years more. I thought he was ready to retire, and there was 2 more years of him actually doing his best. And I was like, what just happened? Like, I didn't even
Yeah.
mean that to happen. I just wanted a cute trick. So that's what started me going, oh, it wasn't Brave Tom that was special. I mean, sure, he was. It was
Mhm.
how I was with him. I was a little kid
Yeah.
in love with my horse who happened to
Oh,
take
sure.
dressage lessons with Brave Tom. And, you know, then I became a professional. I just, put him in trained and put him back in the stall. And, I didn't own the horses. And
Mhm.
the next horse that I actually treated like he was my horse and I was his person, that horse started becoming, quote unquote, more generous and
Mm.
giving me those feelings that Brave Tom gave me of he's doing it like I was there for him. He was doing it. We were doing things together. It wasn't just another training horse. And I don't think that horse had ever been treated like that. And
Yeah.
that's what really made me just stop in my tracks and go, what is happening? I'm like, I've lost the most important piece of being a professional. I need to
Mm.
get that back. And that's where I just said, okay, this little bit of information I have about this kind of training did
Yeah.
this much. I need more. And that's when I ran off and joined the circus. In quotes.
So I think that's so interesting that you didn't go there in that first clinic. You didn't go there with that intention of turning on the lights in his eyes, right? That was almost, by the sound of it, almost an accident, huh?
It was because, most people who start doing natural horsemanship or something like that, they have a problem horse. I
Yeah.
didn't think I was a problem. I thought he was fine. He wasn't tense. He wasn't, he was a nice horse. I just wanted him to have us to have like cute stuff to do. And then the first clinic, those of you know Pirelli, it's like, friendly game. It's like make sure the horse is okay with the tools.
Mhm.
And so, we're waving the stick around, and this very quiet, bomb-proof, quote unquote, horse, I
Mm.
realized that when I moved my stick, he just slowly inched forward. And I'm like, wow.
Oh.
Like that, I was like, he can't stand still. He's like, must move. People push horses. And
Yeah.
as soon
So
as I
like the world's slowest runaway.
exactly. And as soon
Yeah.
as I saw that for what it was tension. He just showed up tension by getting frozen in his body and his
Mhm.
brain and like just robotically. And I said, "Oh my God, that's tension." And then it was my heart melted. I went,
Yeah.
I don't want him to feel tension. I don't want him to think he has to. So it was like the very first moment of the very first clinic changed everything because I just went, how did I
Wow.
not see this? I'm a professional. How did I not see this?
Yeah.
And so through relaxing him and getting rid of those tensions and building the trust and some other, just stuff around that, giving him the time to respond and not just be controlled all the time, that like
Mhm.
turned the light back on. And I went, oh my God, I missed this. I was not being taught this or even exposed to it in the
Yeah.
competitive dressage world.
Yeah, well, and it's not like in the, from the trainer's perspective, or even kind of, I guess I'll say, in that side of the world, right? In that side of horsemanship, it's not like we go into it with the intention to put on blinders and not see those things, right? It's just that it's not. I don't want to say it in a negative way, but it's almost like that part just doesn't seem as focused on, right? but you
Yeah.
can't unsee that once you see it.
Right. And I think this is where we have to zoom out. And, that was a training facility specifically for dressage, and it was
Mhm.
excellent. I mean,
Mhm.
I learned, I think, good dressage. Like, there's
Mhm.
no roll curve. I didn't learn any of that stuff. So it was
Right.
good dressage, but it's a specialty. Someone needs to zoom out and go, what about the horse's whole life? Like that setup was
Mm.
very good for a focused training, but not all the that's not the horse's whole life. And if
Yeah.
it is the horse's whole life, it's out of balance. I mean, so many horses are mentally ill in that training. So I
Mhm.
also noticed that some of my students that would come in and like their horses were happy because they had humans that loved them. They had, they were
Yeah.
getting those other parts filled. They were going on trail rides. They were doing other stuff and coming in for training. But like
Mhm.
the sale horses, the training horses that, you don't want to turn them out because they might trot, in the turnout or something.
Scratch
Like,
themselves up or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where we need to look at the holistic part and go, somebody needs to take care of the whole horse. It's perfectly fine to go in and find a specialist in any aspect of the horse's life and focus on that for a period of time. But we can't lose track of, but what about the other 23 hours in the day? How are those going?
Yeah.
For that, how would that horse describe his life?
Mhm.
And, so a specific sport training facility can be perfect, but not
Mhm.
forever and not for the whole life. And I think that's what hopefully is starting to change more and more these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great way to say it, is, the rest of the horse's life and how do they feel about that? Something that I try to tell my students or try to get them thinking about is, at the end of your session, if your horse was to go out and tell his paddock friends or the horse in the stall next to him, depending on his living situation, if he was to tell him what you did in that session, not only would he actually be able to describe what you did, but how would he feel about it? And how would he feel about himself because of it?
Yeah, I love that. And
Right?
I do similar things. What do you want yours to say about this? And then I have this thing where to zoom out even more from the specific session, I go, if your horse wrote a book today, and the title of the
Ooh,
book, like for my horse, My Life with Karen, what kind of
yeah.
book would it be? Would it be a tragedy? Comedy, a rags to
Right.
riches success story? Would it be, a murder
That's a
mystery?
really interesting thing to think about. I love that.
And
Yeah.
and the thing with that is like, um, there's the whole arc of the story, and we're all in the middle of
Mhm.
the story,
Mhm.
hopefully.
Exactly.
We're in the
Hopefully,
middle,
yeah.
like, the story's not over, but in that story, there might be a chapter that's called, whoa, that Karen is really demanding sometimes. And there might be another chapter that's like, oh my God, that
Mhm.
was so fun. And another chapter is that like, I love my life. My pastor mates are awesome. And then another chapter is like, oh, my butt's a little sore after that, right? Or so, but you can have chapters that are different, but hopefully the whole arc of the story, if you ask your horse, how's my life with Karen? It's like,
Mhm.
overall, I got a good life. And
Yeah.
so I think that's all we can ask for in our lives
Right.
too, right? But overall, it's a net positive.
Yeah. Yeah, a net positive. I like that. I use the analogy of a bank account all the time, right? Like, are you making enough deposits that once in a while you can take a withdrawal without going overboard with it? Um, that's a really great way of thinking. The overall picture, right?
Right.
Because yeah, you're right. There's some days that it's going to be harder, right? And I think it's easy for us to beat ourselves up sometimes over the hard rides, right? Or the rides that just don't feel that great, and sometimes they're important too. In fact, a lot of times they're important to get through the next deep
Mhm.
conversation or a new way of using their body or a new skill to learn or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, when we talk about, I talk a lot about happiness and harmony, and it can
Mhm.
come off as like every day's a Disney movie with Karen, and it's not. But I think the thing is to be conscious of like, things aren't really working today, and so the key is to be able to stop and go, this isn't working the way I wanted. And then you can like pause and go, what does the horse need to know? Like, what, that's my first question. What
Mm,
does the horse need? Or I ask the horse, I'm like, how can I help you with this? Like, what do you need? And just
mhm,
asking that question's gonna, you know, put your brain in a different problem solving mode
mhm.
instead of asking questions like, why isn't this working today? Like, don't ask,
Right,
don't ask your brain to answer that question.
right,
So
you'll
I
come up with one for sure, but
Right,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
we can be conscious, and then the next question I'll have people say, it's like, "Okay, what are you asking for, and is what you're expecting fair, reasonable, and possible?" That's a good question to ask, because sometimes you
mm,
go, "You know what? It's actually not today for whatever reason." And they go, "Good.
right,
Nice to think of that." But sometimes it is. You go, okay, so I think we need to do this. What does ours need? How can I break it down into the smallest piece? How can I make one drop a success? Or how can I just go, it's this, I'll say, it's just a day. And I just stop and I put them
yeah,
away because sometimes it's just not going to happen. And horse is always perfect until we ask him to do something. And sometimes it's just not the
exactly.
right time and we just need to stop. And
Right,
it's just a day.
right,
Have a little think about it. If it becomes a trend, now we got to do something. But
yeah,
um, yeah, I think the hard part is not to get emotionally involved and start getting like, I need to get this done. Like, if
mhm.
you start feeling, I need to get this done, that's like, nope, stop, because you want to approach it from that
Right.
point of view. You know.
And that keeping the emotions out of it can be so challenging sometimes, right? For on both sides of the spectrum, right? On the trainer side of things, it's like here's potentially, depending on how you run your program, it's here's the expectations for the client, here's the time frame that we have to do this within. We got to do the thing, right? And
Hmm.
then on the other side, there's the owner's emotions that get involved because they are emotionally involved because it's their horse, right? It's their time, it's their hopes and dreams, it's that there's so much invested in that. Um, and realistically so, right? So then they can, where one side we take it like we've got to produce results. On the other side, it's like, oh, now I'm going to take it personally if it didn't work, right? Maybe I'm doing something, I'm not good enough, or my horse doesn't like me, or all the
I
things
never
that can
think
come up.
those things. Never. Oh, every Brad ride, I'm like, I quit. I
Uh,
can't do this. I
I'm
think it's
glad to hear you
helpful.
have those too.
Well, I remember everybody does. So I remember
Yeah.
hearing an interview with like Paul McCartney. He's like, every time I hear a new song put out by somebody else, I think, that's it. I'm nobody. I'm like, okay, if Paul McCartney, it's imposter syndrome. And
Yeah.
it's just like, it might not be true when we feel that way, but when
Hmm.
we feel that way, it's because we care, because people who don't care never feel that way. So it's,
Boy,
it's,
well
it's just,
said. Yeah.
yeah.
I really like one of the things that you said there too is what does your horse need to know?
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction. I was just having a discussion with a student earlier today about that. Um, he was riding a younger horse, and we were talking about some lateral work movement. And I was talking about the difference between lateral. I described it as lateral positioning versus lateral work, right?
Mhm.
And really wanting to get the horse confident in understanding. Like if he had thumbs, he could write down the definition of shoulder in and where he needed to be in his balance and things like that, but that's different than now he's confident with it and let's work the muscles
Mhm.
right in that. So like you were talking about, my horse says, oh, I've got a sore butt today, it's like that's for once the horse already understands what that question is, right? If he could write it down, if he could tell the horse in the paddock next to him, hey, this is what shoulder in is, this is how I need to be positioned, and I feel really good when I get there, right? And we see a lot of horses that way, right, that are either on both sides of the spectrum. Either they get really good at knowing where the position should be, but all they get is lateral positioning. And then we get the horses that get put into lateral work, but they couldn't describe what was happening. They would
Yeah.
tell their paddock mate, like, I don't know, she pushed me around, she kept pulling on the outside rein, and for whatever reason, she kept thumping me with her leg, or maybe that's not the case, but I think that there's a difference that we oftentimes need to think about in does the horse understand the skill, and then can the horse do the work?
Yeah, I love that you make that distinction. I think this is right in your wheelhouse with all the in-hand stuff, and
Mm,
that I like to get the dynamic working. It's like, let's
Mhm.
get the essence of it. And I start all my lateral work at the halt. Like,
Yeah.
let's just make sure that we can be there, and that increasing the strength and the stamina comes later. Because, a lot of people are putting a lot of muscle power into not
Mhm.
the shoulder, not the right movement yet.
They're just a crooked horse, right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just strengthening the brace or the contortion.
Mhm.
So yeah, I like to really go like figure out like how can I explain this? How can we get comfortable here? Almost like the the lateral positions are like yoga positions. Get into the position and
Mm.
relax inside of it. Now we
Yeah.
have it, and where we can get what I call first step, best step. And I walk along, and at that post, I'm gonna like get in that position. And
Ah,
if I can get in it and get out of it, okay, now I can add steps. Now I can get in it
yeah.
and then see if I can go a little longer.
Mhm.
But that way, when I start doing it for more strides, it's the good stuff. And I'm thinking, yes, those muscles are strengthening. So I think
Yeah.
we're on the same page with
Yeah.
technique. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That shaping the understanding, right? Instead of
Mhm.
exercising the tension.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. And that takes me speaking of the words and just the ways that we describe things, that takes me back to a video that you shared several years ago. And I'm sure that I hope you've reshared it. I think you have, about self carriage. And
Hmm.
you were grooming one of your horses in the grooming bay at liberty.
Right.
And you were
Hmm.
talking about how and I've described that video. I've sent so many people to that video because of how well you described it, and how self-carriage starts before you're riding. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you picked up on that because it's something that makes people go, wait, what? But
Yeah, and I think it's such a core important concept.
it is. Well, you see
Yeah.
so many horses that are like on the cross ties, and they're like the cross ties are tight. The horse is leaning forward over their
Mhm.
legs, hanging themselves in the cross ties. I'm like, huh, what are they? What are they practicing? So self
Right?
carriage to me is emotional. It's mental, emotional, physical. They know where to be, and they're okay being there. So they organize their bodies to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be true no matter what you're doing. And I
That
think
sounds so simple when you say it that way. Why doesn't it just always work like that?
yeah, and so many people like wait to have self carriage during like a canter pirouette. I'm like, well, that's hard. The horse has a
Sure.
reason to try to dump on the forehand and not work their butts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a dynamic, it's a concept. So if I have a horse, the grooming stall is such a perfect example because they're either in the grooming stall or they're not. And if you let
Right.
go of them, they're either going to stay or they're going to leave. And if, so self-carriage in a way is, like I said, they understand and they're okay being there and they're gonna organize themselves. So that's,
Mhm.
I definitely, so much of the dynamic you can see it in that situation and it's black or white. And it's
Mhm.
harder to see that dynamic sometimes in the middle of a shoulder in, you know,
Right.
are they in self-carriage? Are they sucking back? Are they moving forward to the contact or are they like leaving?
Mhm.
So doing things in a halt and so then what do you have to do to get them okay? So that in the horse in that video, he was being polite, we'll put that in quotes. He was in the cross ties and you can see him change to where he's like, I'm not okay. But
Mhm.
he's a good boy, so he stays there, but you can see he's breathing. And then I'm like, oh, he's gonna blow. And so I don't correct him. I was like, this is tension. He's not emotionally okay being here. What does he need to know? He needs to know that I'm not gonna trap him in places he's scared. That's what
Mhm.
he so what do? I take off the cross ties and I let him leave. And then he's like, I'm out. So I go, okay, now see, see, I promise I'm not going to trap you. Would you like to come back in? And
Right.
he goes, sure, I'll come back in. And then he stands there. He's like, I'm not okay. I was like, you can leave. And we just repeat this because the message is, I'm never going to trap you somewhere you're scared. And by repeating that and by him trusting that I'm not going to do that, he's like, okay, now I'm all right. And so the
Mhm.
difference of him standing there where he decided he's okay, and I waited until he was okay, and then by the end of the video, I'm like, well, he's okay. I can just clip on the cross ties just to make it easier for myself when I go in the tack room because I don't have to add like a hold signal or something.
Right.
But feeling of him standing there and he happens to have decorative cross ties looped to his halter, with the slack in it versus him going, I don't want to be here. I'm at the end of my
Mhm.
rope. I don't want to be here. This is feeling bad, and
Yeah.
that's when an accident happens, you know,
Right.
at worst.
Exactly. Yeah, it becomes it in a sense, we could think of it as a safety net, right? For makes me think you mentioned circus earlier, so I'm thinking somebody on the high wire, right? Walking across the high wire. The net isn't what holds them on the high wire,
Exactly.
right? The net is there for just in case something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Or if
and
you
and
have a
that
horse who's like, I'll stay in the grooming stall, but I'm gonna like reach everything I can reach with my neck and pull it off. So sometimes I
right.
play that game because I think it's cute. And sometimes like, you know what, Ovation, I'm just gonna put these on so you can't turn your head that much because I'm
Right.
tired and we
A little
fling it.
Dennis the Menace stuff. Yeah.
Right, right. Or like I said, if they don't understand the hold signal, then I need to walk in the tack room. Now I'm setting them up for failure because they're like, oh, I guess we can leave now. And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
but a lot of the next thing is my horses learn like hold means stay there. I'll be back. But so it's all these moments of what does a horse need to know in this moment to be successful, and we either need to train it, or manage it, or but it's all again those conscious decisions. Like I am
Mhm.
consciously trapping a horse who's telling me he's scared, and like I don't want to do
Yeah.
that, or
Right.
I'm setting this horse up to be corrected simply because I didn't bother to teach him the thing in the first place, and I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
So that's I'll manage it. Let me just hook the cross ties on so you don't walk off, so I don't have to correct you because I don't have time to teach that thing. And I know my homework is I need to teach you that thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
There you
it's
go.
that same idea can happen when we're riding too. There's certain things that keep coming up and like, oh, I actually need to stop and teach this. I didn't teach it yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right. And then it gets into a little bit I think of the difference between acceptance and obedience, right? Like you
mhm,
were talking about in the cross ties, they're either there or they're not, right? Physically. But then they're either there or they're not mentally also, right? It's like, can they, the difference between standing and standing still, right? In their head, can they
mhm.
really be there? Are they accepting of that? Or are they just doing the thing because they've never not been allowed to do the thing or never been not allowed, yeah, to do the
And it
thing,
gets
right?
tricky. I mean, you could really go deep into that because, are they trained in agreeing? Are they shutting down and going internal? Like, is this good standing
Mhm.
still or not good standing still? Yeah,
Right.
and we're always kind of taking a guess of what they're doing. But I think that's where I think we need to, if we really feel our horses, I think we can feel the like, something's feeling a little edgy or jagged rather than warm and
Mhm.
fuzzy. And I know that sounds like very fluffy, unscientific language, but to risk of sounding like a hippie, it's like there's a vibe out there and we can feel
Yeah.
it. And I think it's, because sometimes our horses will, complain about something, but it's just like they just have a preference, but it's not a
Mhm.
horrible. Okay, I can actually give an example of that today. So I get on my horse Natia and I head out and I'm thinking I'd really like to go in the dressage arena and have what I call my fancy pants day. That means I go in the dressage arena and I do dressage stuff and we prance around and I look in the mirror and it looks, that's what I want to do. So I get on her and I walk off and she very clearly yanks her head and pulls me in the direction of the trails in the forest. And I'm like,
Mm.
she loves to do. And we've been out there all week. So she's like, oh, I really want to go in the forest. And I have to go, what do I do about this? And I decided today, I'm like, come on, Adia. I hear that you want to go in the forest, but let's go to the dressage arena. And so she does it
Mhm.
like 4 times, and then she's like, okay, right. So did she just become? Was I like dominant, and did she have to submit?
Right.
I'm like, so but I'm thinking about this. I'm like, okay, you're allowed
Mhm.
to say I'm a horse listener. You're allowed to listen, but sometimes I want stuff, and then my husband's like, no, not right now, right? So
Right.
I made a decision. I'm like, okay, noted. She really wanted to go to the forest. I'm like, what does it
Mhm.
mean? I don't know yet, but it's noted, and I made a decision. So
Yeah.
then we walk out to the dressage arena, which is in the middle of this, on the edge of this field. So we walk into the field, and then we can go in the dressage arena. But we went into the field. She's walking along fine. And then I thought, I think I'll just stay in the field a little bit. Maybe that'll make her
Mhm.
happy. And
Mhm.
then she pulled to go in the dressage arena. And I thought, no, no, Natia, you can stay in the field. We'll warm up out here. And then I went, wait a minute. So I dropped the reins. I go where you want, Natia. And she went and she did a U-turn and went in the dressage arena, stood in front of it, looked herself in the mirror for a while, and then she went like right in it, and we had a fantastic ride.
Nice.
So it's this is where it's the relationship, and we have to,
Yeah.
take into account. And there are days where I'm thinking, well, you can do whatever you want, Natia. And if she goes, I want to go in the forest, I'll go, okay, great.
Mhm.
Um, so this is where I think if we feel and we notice what's happening, we make a conscious decision. Now, if I had gone in the dressage arena and she like balked at that doorway, or she wasn't feeling quite right, I'd be like, maybe this is one of those days, and I
Mhm.
don't know why, but she's really not into this, and I would have changed my mind again. Um,
Mm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
she was just like, okay, and then she's like, come on, let's go in the fancy pants arena. I'm like,
Let's do it.
okay.
Yeah, I think those conversations are really important, right? And it makes me think like sometimes your kids need to eat their broccoli, right? But you probably shouldn't force feed them their broccoli if you can help it, right? And yeah, very much that same way. It's funny because I just with one of the training horses I've got, I had a similar conversation the other day. I like to we've got the way our hills and fields and things like that are set up is I like to give them options when we warm up. We always do it outside of the arena, almost always, and then we come in and I was going to do just a little loop and go. And he said, no, I want to go like complete other side of the property. We were weaving between horse trailers. We were up in the loafing sheds for the layover horses and just like going for a big adventure visit.
Mhm.
And you could feel with him, he was like, okay, I'm ready to go to work. Like, interest, curiosity satisfied, right? And ready to go to work. And he felt great. And I think that is one of those things that if your horse knows you're listening, right? Then
Exactly.
the conversation is very different, right? And
Exactly.
and we can get, like you said, we can get as hippy dippy woo woo about it as we want, but it doesn't take, like you said, it's kind of easy to feel a preference or to feel a bit of a discomfort mentally, emotionally. We feel it with people all the time, right? How many times have you been in the line at a grocery store, right? The checkout line, and the person in front of you, you just kind of feel itchy, right? Like, or the person behind you, you can tell they're just really relaxed, or that sort of thing. The idea that nervous systems are contagious. You can pick up on it if you don't even have to try very hard, right? If you're just trying to be aware, it's pretty easy to pick up on most times, unless the horse is really shut down, like the horse we talked about at the beginning of
Mhm.
the conversation, right? Then you have to be able to dig a little bit deeper to see where's that coming from, what's that about, that sort of thing, and how do
Yeah,
we bring that out? And when we do bring it out, if we ask them what they're feeling, sometimes we have to be prepared to listen to the answer.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the tricky part. It's much easier if there were just rigid dogmatic rules. Never let your horse
Right.
do this. Always make your horse do that. Like it was so
Right.
much more simple back then, but it's more complicated now, but I just
Yeah.
love this idea. Well, here's the thing. I believe, my opinion, everybody is allowed to have exactly the kind of relationship they want with their horse. I mean, you're just allowed to,
There you go.
keeping in mind that horse's whole experience. So, meaning if your horse is
Mm.
living in a place where other people are going to handle it, set that horse up for success. You can have whatever, like, you can have it, make it okay that your horse like puts his throat in your mouth and you think it's cute, but it's not safe for anybody, including your horse, to teach him or put him in a situation where he does that to someone else and gets smacked or someone gets hurt. So you're
Mhm.
allowed to have the relationship you want with your horse, just you have to be smart. You have to like think about the whole picture.
Yeah.
But so so I think it's really just feeling through it, and again keeping that big picture so you understand what you're creating, what the cause and effect of what you're doing is,
Mhm.
and that if there's something that's not working, you can stop and go, huh, what what's not working? What do I need to do? And just be calm and curious about it. and then that's the first step to finding the answers.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. What a great way to think about it, because it is, you do have to set your horse up. I think we have the responsibility to set
Mhm.
our horse up to be successful in the rest of the world
Yeah.
also, right? Not just in the hour that we have with them, but how much is that education carrying over into the other 23 hours and the other places that they're going to be?
Hmm. And the other
Yeah.
people handling them, what are the rules of the
Right.
barn? And I'm spoiled. I can have I have my horses here, nobody else around, and they can
Yeah.
be as ridiculously cute and annoying as I want them to be. And I warn people, Ovation's gonna lick your face. He's gonna try.
That's hilarious.
He will
Yeah.
ask politely, but he will try. So
That's perfect. That's
yeah,
perfect.
okay.
I love it. So that brings me to our conversation about the happy athlete, right? And we say, even Article 401 of the FEI Dressage Rulebook states the object of dressage is the development of the horse into a happy athlete. What's
Yep.
that mean? Or what does that mean to you specifically?
Yeah, well, fun fact, they took it out of the rule book and they put it in some other
Okay.
section called, I don't know, interesting stuff or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Things
It's
things we didn't find
going
important
away.
anymore. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, the rest of that quote is according to the FEI,
okay.
the object of dressage is the development of a horse into a happy athlete through harmonious education, resulting in a horse that's calm, loose, supple, and flexible, but also confident, attentive, and keen, thus achieving perfect understanding with his rider. Believe it or
Mm.
not, that is the FEI's definition
Wow.
of dressage, which means to me, if that's not happening with your horse, you're not doing dressage.
Yeah, there you
There's
go.
that.
There you go. Yeah, that yes, that's
Yeah.
such an important distinction to make, right? And I had a podcast guest a couple years ago who made a comment, and I can't think of her name offhand, and I feel really bad about it. But she made the comment, "Well, that's not my dressage,"
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting way to say that, right? That's not my dressage. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if your horse is not feeling that way, then it's not dressage as per at least the original rules or the old, definition
Right.
of it uh, from the FEI. So how do we get that to happen? How do we? I mean, we could certainly go into why the hell is that not what we see most
Yeah.
often, but how do we achieve it? I think
Yeah.
there's I had a lot of people recently when things have come out about other trainers that were ugly and lots of the stuff that we see on social media, the ugly stuff, right? Like, oh, do a podcast on this, talk about that. It's like, well, do we want to? I guess I think about it with our horses all the time. Don't add energy to things you don't want,
Yeah.
right? So how do we add the energy to the things that we do want? And I think that's about focusing first and foremost on what does that mean to us and how do we
Mhm.
achieve that,
Yeah. No,
right?
I appreciate that. Like be the light, but go towards the light
Yeah.
let's intervene as necessary to
Exactly. And not be afraid to talk about it, right? Be afraid to discuss it, but really put the focus where the focus belongs, and that's on doing better.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
can I share my screen now that I learned
Oh my
this?
gosh, yes, please do.
I learned that on this program I can share my screen. So share screen. I have to talk out loud when I do these things. Share screen. Okay, I'm clicking it. Oh,
Look at that. It's working.
it's a miracle. All right,
I
so
love it.
yeah, this is on my website. You can find this on dressagenaturally.net, click about, and then you'll see Happy Athlete Training Scale. So I created this, or I just put this together to kind of answer that question that you're asking, Patrick. Like, how do we do this? Right? That's always, like
Mhm.
that's a nice concept. What do we do? So
Yeah.
I really thought about it's about prioritization. That's the important part. And like I talked about earlier about zooming out and looking at the horse's whole life.
Mhm.
Whoever's, if you're the human for a horse, you're responsible for this. So no matter
Mm.
what professional it's in training with, if you're, I think, a really good professional, you're thinking about this. And maybe you're not supplying all this for your training horses, but you kind of suggest that the students, take care of this. But let's just look
Yeah.
at it. Um, so here's the training scale. And so the base, which is also here called the first priority, is
Mm,
happiness, right? That the horse is happy, healthy, calm, content, comfortable. Um, the first priorities are giving your horse a life he can enjoy, um, and you arriving to your horse as your best self. So happiness means that your
mm.
horse's basic needs of friends, forage, and freedom are met. He can enjoy his life even when you're not around. I think that's important. And your horse is mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy. And that you take care of your own happiness so you can arrive to your horse as your best self. Because horses make us happy, but they shouldn't have to.
They shouldn't have to be the therapist, right?
Right, right. It's like, I mean, they are, let's all face
They
it,
all
but
yes, we'll be real about it,
I'm miserable. I'm gonna go tell this to my horse. Anyway, so
right?
we're happy individuals, and I feel like, so if I wasn't there with my horse and someone went out and visited my horse when I'm not there, like, hey, how's your life going? It's like, yeah, good. I'm all right. Like, that's, I just want my horse to be like, yeah, thumbs up. That's I think a baseline. Let's just get to that.
Yeah.
So then let's say that your horse is like, yeah, my life's good, thumbs up. And the human the same way, like, I'm good, like, I'm good. Now you have a better chance of harmonizing together. So if you're both happy
Mm.
enough, um,
Sure, yep.
enough, right? Realistically, you can be in harmony. So the second priority are things like harmony. Now I put self-carriage there, right? Self-carriage.
Mm.
We're okay being together. None of us is trying to leave.
Oh,
We are
sure, okay, yeah,
space,
yeah,
right? So we're in harmony, because a horse who's trying to leave or pushing on you, you can't be in harmony. So
and you're hanging
self-carriage,
on to him saying, "I will make you love me."
exactly. So there's attentiveness, you're attuned, you're listening, you're like, I'm feeling
Mm,
something going on here. You're picking up on the vibes. So you're emotionally connected, right? And so then you can go down here and get more details. Um,
okay.
Harmony is the building of mutual trust. Being a person your horse can trust is a prerequisite to expecting your horse to be trustworthy. You're able and willing to follow your horse, and your horse is able and willing to follow you, right? It's like you're together.
Yeah.
It's like, you go out in the pasture and he's like, hey, you're cool to be with. Sometimes your horse just ignoring your presence is harmony. It's better than running away or coming over and attacking you,
This is
right?
true.
So
This is true.
like, keep it simple. So then, if you're
Yeah,
happy and you're kind of okay with each other, now you have a better chance of being able to communicate, right? So the third
okay.
priority is now communication. All right, we're okay together. Let's talk. So there's some responsiveness, and I know in there is like motivation, but let's put that in communication. You can express what you want. Your horse is like, okay. They're eager. They understand. They're willing. You're mentally
Mm,
connected. Like, hey, would you do this? And the horse is like, sure. Right. So there's a communication going on. Or the horse is like, no, I don't understand. You're like, oh, let me explain it. um,
yeah, right.
and so down here, um, communication is a two-way dialogue where you listen to your horse as much as you make requests of him. You seek understanding over control. You honor and value your horse's opinion and realize that it's your responsibility to educate and motivate him to willingly participate in your ideas. He was not put on this planet to be a dressage horse. He was put on the planet to eat grass and walk. Um, and so it's all right. All right, you have a happy horse, happy human. You're okay with each other. You can have conversations. Now, for me, that's when it's like, okay, let's look at how he's moving, right?
Mm.
Because it doesn't matter how much cadence your horse has when he's running you out of the arena, right?
More forward, more forward.
Yeah. Like, oh, but look how round and pretty he is as he leaps, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it makes sense, but right. So at this point, like, okay, now we can think about how this happy camper can move better. So, fourth
Yeah.
priority, are they energized, balanced, supple, rhythmic, aligned,
Mm,
physically connected? You're doing all the healthy movement kind of stuff. And, scroll down here. I'm so proud of this page.
this
Um,
is good. It's great. This is
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Your horse's way of moving is a dynamic of relaxation, energy, and balance. The sweet spot is where your horse feels ease and freedom and can carry you without pain. In this moment, your aids are minimal. The quality of movement is only as good as the happiness, harmony, and communication that it arises from. And fear, confusions, and feeling of helplessness work against the dynamic of the healthy posture we're seeking.
Mhm.
Right? So it doesn't matter, what he looks like if it's a ton of bricks and you're digging your spurs into him. Congratulations, you got
Yeah,
your horse in the
right.
shape that he's hates. Um, all right, so now you're happy campers, you're okay with each other, you're talking, and now you can move together. What's next? Anything you want. Anything you want. Everything you do is going to be better, right? So
Yeah.
sport is, sport specific skills. Get your cow cutting better, or whatever it is. Your horse becomes agile,
Mhm.
athletic, strong, like you were talking about, Patrick. Like you get the essence of the movement. Now you build the strength. They're more
Mhm.
coordinated, they're more powerful. And so I'm hoping that when people look at this, it's like, oh, that's so dumb. It's so obvious, right? It should feel obvious, but think about how many horses spend it's upside down. They're spending a lot of time
Yeah,
like doing a sport and very
yeah.
little amount of time being happy. Where
Mhm.
my horses, I want them to feel like they're good, they're happy, and I am with them. And a very small percentage of the time, half hour, 40 minutes, a few times a week, we do a sport.
Mhm.
But the whole life, like this is not just the training session. I don't take my half-hour training session and spend all time just being happy. No, this is the whole life. This is
Yeah.
a whole life. So when, I realize when I go to like consult with about a horse or I can stop sharing this or yeah, anyway, consult on a
Yeah, that's
horse
great.
and
We'll
I
post that
walk
link up
in.
there for folks again.
Thank you. And I walk into a situation like I'm having this trouble with this horse and I walk into the situation, I realize what I'm asking, and when I'm my coach is the same thing. It's like we're saying, well, how much turnout does he get? Does he what is he eating?
Mhm.
What so how are those, you know oh, you need help with shoulder in? Okay, well, let me see how he responds to just a forehand yield. Like this is what I'm doing in my brain. So this scale is a result of me going, what am I looking at when I meet a new horse for the first time? I'm always scanning. I'm like, you need help with your canter pirouettes, but I'm scanning. And why might
Mhm.
he be hanging on your hands? How is he in the cross ties? Has he been turned out? Is he
Right.
frustrated? Is he shut down? Is he, you know, does he get forward freedom friends? Is he a pushy horse? Maybe he needs to play, and but it can also help you diagnose because you can also go, yeah, he is happy, he is harmonious. I think
Mhm.
it actually is a biomechanical problem. Like, check,
Mhm.
check, check. Yeah, I think I do need to think about alignment because, and you can feel confident doing that instead of going, yeah, I think he's scared of something. So
Mhm.
it's a very useful, like you can really use it as a checklist. And here's an example from a clinic I was watching. It was a really good a clinician I liked. I was taking a lesson with him too. But a horse came in. It was a youngish horse, and it was in a new arena, and it balked going into the covered arena. And so it's
Okay.
like wouldn't go in, wouldn't go in. It eventually is time for the lesson.
Mm.
So they got the
Mhm.
horse in there, got in there, and it kind of just froze. And so, of course, now it's not going forward. So more forward, more forward, more leg, put your leg on. And that wasn't working. And so pretty soon they're behind it with the long whip, helping it go.
Mhm.
And pretty soon this young horse is in a cold sweat, being pushed around the arena rather nicely. Very, they weren't mad at it, but
Yeah.
I'm like, it was such a perfect example of like use the happy healthy training scale. They were trying to get a sport to be done. The biomechanics were not good because the horse was afraid, right?
Right.
Fear, confusion, feelings of helplessness.
Mhm.
So like where was the problem? The problem was in the second priority, trust. That horse did not
Yeah.
trust that situation. There was no emotional connection. The horse is going, I'm scared in there. And the rider's going, too bad. You're going to go in there anyway. And then we're going to
Mhm.
make you work the wrong muscles. So when I was looking
Right.
at them going, okay, here we have choices. That's the problem. There's no way around it. The horse was scared to be in there.
Mhm.
He wasn't comfortable in there, whatever you want to say. They could have said, you know what? Let's keep the horse in here and just make sure he ends up walking away going, oh, I wasn't happy going in there, but it's actually okay. But that
Mhm.
might not look like a dressage lesson. Or
Right.
there was a arena right next door to the covered. People would have had to walk 30 steps and they could have had the dressage lesson, doing dressage stuff in the outdoor arena where the horse had warmed up and was completely comfortable.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's one of those like moments where you go, huh, something's happening.
Mhm.
What does the horse need? If you ask that question, the horse needs to feel comfortable in the covered arena. That's the
Right.
whole
Right.
problem. And but they were just like, must have dressage lesson
Must do the thing.
right
Yeah.
now because it's time. Must do this thing. And that's where again, like zoom out and go, wait a minute, how can we problem solve for exactly what the horse needs? It was just a waste. It was a waste.
Mhm.
They weren't able to do dressage lesson, and it was a horrible experience for the horse. So
Yeah.
now nothing got better, and it was a shame. And it was simply because that trainer, who again I've taken lessons with him, he's really good, but I'm
Mhm.
prepared to take the lesson he teaches.
Mhm.
This was a foundational emotional problem that was not in his area of expertise, and everybody,
Right.
humans, get caught up in the what am I supposed to do at this time because that's what we do, and then
Mhm.
add a couple drops in the implied assumption of obligingness. The horses are supposed to do what we ask them to do.
Mhm. Right.
So it
Right.
was just like I was like, that's it. Like that's like how do we see that for what it is and just go call it as it is. Go, wow, this horse is really not comfortable in here. Huh.
Mhm.
What can we do about this?
Yeah. What do we adjust, right? Do we
We
adjust the lesson
adjust.
plan? Do we adjust the location? Yeah,
And when
exactly.
do we
As Ray
see
Hunt used
it's
to
not
tell us all the
working?
time, adjust to fit the situation.
And maybe the horse could have like gone a couple times around and been like, oh, I'm good in here.
Mhm.
So it could be worth a try, but you
Mhm.
just the consciousness of it. And I'm hoping that happy athlete training scale is just a nice tool to kind of go,
Mhm.
where's the problem? And in general, there might be problems in several areas. Go to the lowest one first, right? So if it's like, well, the biomechanics
Oh,
are
yeah.
terrible because, but it's a trust thing, like which is where the best place to solve it, usually the lower one. You
Mhm.
can keep working on the biomechanics, but until the horse is not afraid, they're not going to be.
Right, right, and
And
looking at it as the pyramid, as the triangle, right? Go to
mhm,
that place of the most support,
right.
right? The lower on the triangle, the wider that is, and that's what I think is really visually appealing about the idea of talking about it like a triangle, right,
Mhm.
or a pyramid, is that if you can go to that widest place, that place that's going to give the most support, sometimes those other things will take care of themselves, won't they? Right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know there's probably some people thinking like, okay, well, what do I do? Just stand there with my horse? And there might be like things where you go, no, I'm actually going to ask my horse to do like a serpentine. But
Mhm.
it's the why are you doing it? You have to
Yeah.
do the serpentine so that your horse becomes more relaxed and trusting, not
Mhm.
to make him bend and submit, even though he wants to run out of the arena, and you're going to get control over him by doing this tight little serpentine.
Right.
It's the oh, my horse is afraid. That's a higher priority, lower on the base, but higher priority. So I have to
Mhm.
do things so that he ends up feeling better. Or if it's communication, I have to do things so that he ends up going, oh, that's what that means when you do that, right?
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
you do something so that he actually is more supple in a line, depending on where the biggest problem is. So yeah, so it's there's a lot of stuff. I don't just only wait till my horse is like smiling in the field till I do something with him, but I'm going,
Right.
I need to make sure he's feeling whatever it is, healthier,
Mhm.
or he's getting more social time, or so it doesn't mean you just freeze in your tracks and stare at your horse until he's happy. But
Right.
we
I think that's
kind
a
of
really important thing for people to think about, right? Because it's easy to say, "Well, he's not ready." Well, it's almost easy to get stuck in that trap, right?
ex-
Of, "Oh, he's not ready. He doesn't feel good about it." The thing of, "He's not inviting me to do this thing." whatever this thing
Mhm.
might be. And I'm not saying that our horses shouldn't invite us to climb on, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, if he's never been ridden before, he would have no idea what that invitation even looks like, right? So I think
Right.
there's appropriate questions that we ask ourselves in the quest to solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love, I love the messy middle because that's really where life is. So there's that's why I love like these blueprints because like here's some logic. I hope it makes sense. And then the actual application of it is rarely like step one, step two, step three. But we have to, kind of keep it all in a big picture logical thing. And again, any one day might be like, all right, I'm gonna try this and see if that helps that. And sometimes the doorways open in interesting ways. It's not they don't go necessarily step one, step two, step three, but like I said, you can be doing something over here that then helps something over there, and then because that's
Hmm.
better, it helps this other thing. And the more I think you can plot it on some sort of blueprint, then you can more easily have a chance of recreating it or understanding like, oh, that's what was going on, and then you can like apply that
Hmm.
again in another situation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's so great, and I'm going to share that link again
Okay.
here on the screen. And for anybody who's catching this as a listen to it after, that's dressagenaturally.net/training hyphen scale. And that's
Yes.
the graphic is fantastic. The way that you've got that written up is fantastic. It's easy to follow, and it's I think it's helpful to just make it clear, where's the problem coming from.
Yeah.
Where's the problem coming from, and how do we best what spot should I look at the best? And I love the way that you describe that is go to the widest place, right? The lowest on that pyramid possible, or the lowest on that triangle, and start from there. And hey, you know what? If you're wrong, you're going to move through that spot really quickly up the next rung,
Yeah.
right?
And to remember to look at ourselves. I mean, I think I'll say I've had my days where I did not
Mhm.
belong in the barn. And or we've
Yeah.
seen the person who comes in is cursing at their horse because they're grumpy at the world. And like, guess
Hmm.
what? They don't have good rides.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
think just that, that's why I want to put ourselves in there too. Like we've got to arrive. But yeah,
Yeah. I think you could just as easily write that, and it would be the same words about the person, right, as
exactly.
it is about the horse, all the way up from the
Yeah.
sport specific skills, at the top to that base relaxation and comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think that's a really great way to say that. So, speaking of the doors opening for things to improve, as a perfect segue there. Before we jumped on our call here, you mentioned something about having a course that
Mhm.
has just recently opened, or is in the open stage right now. Do you want to tell us about that?
I would love to tell you about this. So yeah, this this course I'm so proud of. I mean, when I first started doing dressage, differently, um, I really had to think about like how am I doing this? Like what are the pieces from my old dressage life that I'm keeping? What am I incorporating? And so this technique of finding the sweet spot of healthy biomechanics was, starting to develop it back in like 2003 because I'm old,
Okay.
Patrick. How old are you? Don't tell me. But yes, this is where I started mulling this around, going, how does this fit together? And so teaching this all over the world and honing it and crafting it. And so then this was the thing I would teach in live clinics. And the whole point is at the end of the clinic, I'm sitting outside the arena. My students are all going around going, yes, this is there. Like they're totally empowered
Mm,
and they're telling me when their horse is in the best sweet spot of so it's very like empowering techniques and it really incorporates the kind of partnership, everything we've talked about, looking at the
mhm.
horseman that way. And so then in 2013, um, not just in COVID, but in 2013, I turned this into an online course, 6 modules. So we've been teaching it in there since 2013, and we open it twice a year.
Okay.
And now is one of those times. So March is one of the months that we open it, and it's we walk you through everything from the basic foundational pieces that you need to the communications that we're going to build on, and then how do we play with them not how do we play with them so that the horse arrives at this calm, loose, supple, flexible state through harmonious
Mm,
education, right? And so it's not just words. It's like we really use the communications to play with the horse in a way that they participate. We're actually asking the horse, hey, where do you feel best? What feels better to you, this speed or that speed? With your shoulders here or there?
mm.
Do you like me better when I sit here? And so, and I really empower students to trust that they're feeling something and trust that they can get those communications and then play with their horse and they'll get 80% on target all by themselves. When and if somebody goes, oh my God, that looks so good, and you're like, I'm not doing anything. So it's this because, well, here's the premise. Things like balance and suppleness and rhythmicness, all that should feel good to the horse.
Mm,
So you
mhm.
give the horse some choices, they'll start to go, I here feels good. Can I stay here? And that's
Mm.
where like this sweet spot is called that because at that moment you're both agreeing. You're like, this feels good. The horse like, this really
Okay.
does feel good because they're
Yeah.
blowing out and they're balanced. And that's where we try to get that sweet spot with ease all by yourself in the middle of a field in the middle of Sweden in the winter. You can find this. They'll teach you how. And you'll be 80% there. And then if your instructor comes along and goes, I think if your neck was a little more here and maybe a little quicker
Mm.
tempo, you just ask your horse and they're like, okay, because
And it's easy to do from that place.
right, because it's not putting them in a perfect posture. So it's a really cool protocol. And then by the end of the course, so we do that in connection with the reins and how to actually use that protocol for improving posture with your own body. And then by the end, we teach the basic like categories of gymnastic training, why each kind of exercise develops a certain kind of thing with your horse, so you can start to make your own
Mm.
training plans. And we have weekly live Q&A calls. You get private coaching. I've got my dressage naturally instructors in there. We have them. I was going to say the most amazing community on Facebook, but yours is probably really amazing too, Patrick.
Ah, there we go. There
I
we go.
think
Yeah,
I think we
we
already have
share
a
we
lot.
share amazing communities. There
We
you go.
share an amazing community, so it's as good as your community. But
Well, and we have a lot of mutual students too, which I
we do.
think is
No, that's what I mean.
fantastic.
We
And
we really do
yeah.
share, and just the non-judgmental, positive. We're here to help you kind of vibe.
Mm.
It's and so, and then we have, yeah, if anybody who signs up before the 24th, like it includes 6 months of the weekly live calls and 6 months in my video classroom. If you sign up before
Okay.
the 24th, you get an additional 6 months of live weekly calls. So like if you sign up now, you get a year of every week. There's someone to call and talk to, a real person to go, hey, here's what's going on with my horse.
That's
Celebrate the
fantastic.
wins and help you problem solve. And it's just this is really I love this course. It's the heart. It's kind of the middle. It like to use the happy athlete training scale. It touches on every single one of those, really focusing on the harmony, communication, and biomechanics part. It's that bridge of like taking
Mm.
that trusting relationship and bringing it into improving how they move. But it all lays on that training scale.
That's fantastic. Well, and for people that are catching this in the audio replay afterwards, that's at dressagenaturally.net/sweet spot. I love that. And what a great name for that too, because it just feels like that perfect, easy sweet spot,
Yeah,
right? Where
yeah,
you can
and
make little tweaks from there.
exactly. And so one of the things we teach is like that if you have a happy little camper trotting along and you're thinking, I'd like him to move better. It came from me going, okay, what am I doing? And realizing I'm the three conversations that I'm having with the horse at that moment are about relaxation, energy, and balance. And think about the different
Mm,
combinations. Like I could move the shoulders over here and or increase the energy, or be like, hey, chill out, horse, or like, so there's the more we can talk to our horse and communicate with our horse about those three different categories of things, you can just turn those dials and stumble across a better way of moving. And that's actually what I do.
mm,
Like I feel like the curiosity and experimentation with things that are in a good quality of communication
Hmm.
is I'll find things faster sometimes than if I get to like, it must be exactly here because I'm a dressage trainer and I know their shoulder needs to be here. Because I'm constantly surprised. I'm like, really? You feel better when I do that? Interesting, but
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
take it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, you probably find that too. I mean, I'm sure like when you're with a horse,
Mhm.
you're doing these little things of like, and then you're, oh, there it is, right? So there's the
Exactly.
technique, and then there's the play inside the technique. And I
Hmm.
analogy I use is like those three conversations are almost like the primary colors. And think of if you're an artist and you put
Mm.
red, blue, and yellow on your palette, and you want to make any color in the universe with those three colors. You take a
Yeah.
little red, you mix over here, and then some blue, and you just keep playing with it and mixing it around. You're like, there, that's exactly the color that I want. So I think trainers do this, but they don't necessarily even are conscious about it because you're making those
Right.
little micro adjustments.
Hmm.
That's what you're doing. And then students are over there trying to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really try to get students to go, listen, just you got to play with it. It doesn't matter what I think about it until you can talk to your horse about what you want to talk to him about. And you can find the spot that you think feels best.
Hmm.
And then from there, I'll go, okay, let me make a suggestion here of you might try a
Yeah.
little more of this or a little more of that. But that's what, so it's like the 80%, but I need students to be with that and feel free to trust that they're like, that feels better. Because the horse doesn't care what I think. The horse is like, did I do it, mom? Do you like that? Is that good?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And it is. It's like, it makes me think, you mentioned the primary colors. It makes me think of like cooking, right? Do we need a little more salt? Do we need a little more pepper? I mean, there's a lot more
Mhm.
spices we can get into, but yeah, that can it be the little things that we change? And what do those little things, what changes do those little things bring? Instead of
Exactly.
having to make a complete total overhaul,
Yeah. And I know
right?
but like, isn't it interesting? Sometimes you have a horse in front of you and it clearly looks like they need more energy, but then, well, like my horse Vivaldi, I needed to increase the relaxation in order for
Mm.
the energy to be expressed. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you
Right.
change the balance, and then that's what calms the horse down. So
Yeah.
I always find it interesting how those three conversations play together, and I'm often surprised at what it is. It's often not the direct thing. Clearly they need that. I'm like, no, just play with all of them and
Right.
just see. And yeah, you get that difference because yeah, sometimes you think, oh, I gotta get aligned, I gotta get aligned, I gotta get this alignment. And then, then you just um increase the tempo one day and oh, now they're aligned.
Yeah. And things fall into place. Yeah.
Right,
Right.
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 And then
Exactly.
afterwards you can go, oh yes, clearly I did that, and you can sound, feel really smart. But the experiment, if
Right.
I don't experiment, I might miss it. Even with
Yeah.
horses that I know really well.
Right, right, absolutely, and when you get that feeling, that's you can't unfeel that feeling, right? It
Exactly.
just feels right, and that's where again I think that just the title of the sweet spot, I think that's fantastic because it does. It's just you can't unfeel that. You play with a few things and things just turn up right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. So I've got some wrap up questions for you also, but where else can folks find you? That's going to be the first one of it. Where else can folks find you if they want to learn more about Karen Rolfe and dressage naturally and all the things you got going on?
Yeah, I'm very easy to find. Thank you, Google. So you can Google dressage naturally or my name, and my website's dressagenaturally.net. And on there, there's lots of buttons you can click that says free videos. And like that's a nice way to start because we just give you 3 videos. And I picked 3 that address some of the most common things that people approach me with. Like my horse doesn't, my horse is low energy, it's not going, or my horse is going too fast, or the connection with the rein. So when you sign up for the free videos, you get 3 that I think are kind of unique, maybe a fresh perspective on those things. And so it gives you something you can try. So that's an easy thing to do. And there's a lot of information on my website. So just feel free to poke around. I have a podcast too called Horse
Hmm.
Training and Harmony. And I have a blog. So and Facebook, of course. So I'm easy to find, but and I just wanted to say on that page, the dressagenaturally.net/sweet spot,
Mhm.
If you look around on that page, if you're like, "Hey, that course looks interesting, but I'm not sure," look on that page for a link where you can book a private consult. It's free, and you're going to talk to
Okay.
my right hand person, and she'll listen to what's going on with your horse. And if we don't think it's a good fit for you, we'll tell you. And if we
Mm.
do, we'll tell you. But it's if anybody's like, I'm not sure for whatever reason, just book a consult. And it's just nice sometimes to just be able to have a real person to talk to. Uh,
Yeah, that's
and
fantastic.
listen.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like you said, feel if it's gonna be the right fit or not.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Great. Cool. All right. So, one of our wrap-up questions on here. Where do you see the future of horsemanship headed? I feel like this could be a whole discussion in itself, so maybe it's not a
Oh,
fair wrap-up question to start with, but
no, no, it's a good one. Okay, let me challenge myself. I mean, it's it's so funny because I'm in my bubble,
Mhm.
and then I forget that there's like a whole other bunch of people doing horses out there. Every now and then Facebook sends me a bunch of stuff. Want to see this? And I'm like, no, I don't.
Right?
Don't want to see that at all. So I'll just speak to my world, in the biggest bubble of my world. But I love that the conversation is being had about welfare.
Mm,
Sometimes it brings up stuff we don't want to see. I mean, I've been in this mode of thinking about horses and their whole life, for a long time. I've always been about that. But I think through a lot of the, social media and the pressures that things are changing. They are.
mhm.
And that's all. This is a whole other conversation, but I think, anytime we're going, maybe we should think about the horses. I think it's a good thing. I think we have to
Yeah.
be careful to say something in the moment if we need to, like, hey, that doesn't look really nice for that horse. Like that, it could just be that the power of that to somebody else. Like, hey, that doesn't
Mm,
really look right to me. But then we also have to be careful we're not like nitpicking, people who are really just trying. They are doing the right thing
yeah,
and they're not perfect.
yeah.
So I think the
Right. I
horse
love the way
world,
that you mentioned that about the clinic that you went to, right? Where the
yeah,
horse was struggling, you know? It's like, "Hey, it's not the guy's not a jerk," right? It's like, "Hey, this is" it was kinda it was an out of his wheelhouse sort of a conversation, you know, maybe, or in that moment, right? It's not that he was in there trying to do the wrong thing.
yeah,
It was the way that the situation was playing out, and he was trying to adjust for the way that he saw fit to fit the schedule that, was expected of him as well.
and I'm glad you brought that up again because you mentioned something earlier about this of like what's expected. So he was like, "Oh,
Mm,
I need to teach a dressage lesson because that's what they're
yeah,
paying for." So
yeah.
this is something because I work with other professionals too, and I've been hearing this a lot, and I think this is really exciting, and I love to talk about it. Is there's I'm hearing from professionals saying things like, "I know that I need to give the horse a break or spend this other time on the ground or whatever the slow, the slow and right thing
Mm,
is, but
mhm.
my client is expecting fill in the blank." Okay, so I
Yeah.
hear professionals saying that. I also hear owners of horses saying, "This doesn't feel right, but he's the professional and I don't want to be second guessing him all the time." So I'm thinking
Mhm.
like, wait a minute. Everybody's doing something that they know doesn't feel right and nobody's saying it out loud. So
Yeah.
I'm just forming this question as we're talking, but I think the way I'd like to see the horse world go is that we call it as it is and we are not afraid to speak up. I've stopped lessons middle of a lesson that I've had and I went, "You know what? This is enough for my horse. And you
Mhm.
can call me disrespectful if you want, but it's enough. I'm done. It's
Mhm.
on me,
Mhm.
not you. Fine." But that's hard. That was hard for me. And
It's hard to do.
that
It's
was in the
it's
last
really
few
hard to
years.
do. Yeah.
I was kind of, anyway, but to the power, like every video that we see of the like icky stuff that we don't want to see, there's someone sitting on the rail laughing. But
Yeah.
but it's like I wrote a blog on this. It's called the bystander, syndrome.
Mm.
It takes one. one person to go, oh, oh, that looks really harsh. And then maybe someone else will go, yeah, it does. And then maybe the owner horse will go, yeah, that doesn't feel right. I mean, I get this a lot. I'll go to loosen someone's noseband and I
Yeah.
see them go, oh, I never wanted that to happen. It never felt right. And then I take the noseband off and they burst into tears. I
Yeah.
knew that didn't feel
Yeah.
right, but I was just trying to be a good student. So
Yeah,
I
or
think
I just came from a clinic with so and so and they tightened it 5 holes, or
yeah.
yeah,
So if
exactly.
we can, I think I'd like, this isn't where it's going, but I'd like to go, is we can just go, well, wait a second. Like when students, talk about stuff that's going with their instructors, I'm like, just ask them why they're doing that. Or I said,
Mhm.
or maybe just let them know, to go up to your trainer, go, it's okay. Like, it's all right if we don't get this done. It's okay if in three
Mhm.
months he's not walk, trot, cantering. Like, it's okay. Like everybody's following the other one. And
Right.
I think people are feeling the vibes, but they're
Yeah.
afraid. And I've had top trainers go, they need this, but I can't do that because. And I'm like, you are the professional. You need to say, it's
Mhm.
my professional opinion that
Mhm.
this horse needs fill in the blank instead of that. And if you're the owner of the horse and you think that you don't like what they just said, ask them why. Or
Right.
that seems kind of harsh. Like, if you can't ask them a question and get a reasonably discussed answer, that's a red flag and get out of there.
Right.
So
Right.
I'd love to see that the positive part of living in this world with the internet and social media is that we have I'm laughing. We have good conversations. Maybe that's not going to happen on social media, but it can happen in the moment when you're in the moment with your horse as a professional
Mm.
or the student, and you feel you feel that moment that you
Mhm.
stop and you go, I'm feeling something just doesn't feel right. Can we talk about this? And if you can't talk about it, it's a red flag because nothing needs to be done today
There you go.
in this
Right.
moment. Most things
Right.
can stop and have a conversation. And
Absolutely.
and just to ask the question and be like, hey, can we just talk about what's going on right here? I just need to understand. Like, can you explain?
Mm.
So it doesn't have to wait till we're like yelling at each other. Just go, oh, this doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
so I hope that's where it's going because otherwise,
Otherwise,
I'm
we're
just,
doomed. No, it's
otherwise I'm just gonna stick my head in the sand and play with my beautiful horses over here in Disneyland.
right. There you go. And you do have such a beautiful little oasis there. It's
Oh,
like you
yes,
can
you
get lost in that little
here.
bubble.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of having Patrick here as a guest, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So cool. I love that. And I love that thought that, yes, we need to be able to have the conversations, right? And have them not as, if we can, not as accusations, not as arguments, but as conversations,
Yeah,
right? And I think that could change the trajectory of so much of it,
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's a whole nother
Easier
discussion
said
as
than done.
well.
Like there's a reason I hide in my bubble because I'm not, I can't say that I hope that I would if I'm in that
Yeah.
moment. And I know I've done that for myself and my horses. Now I'm good at going, no, don't do that with my horse.
Hmm.
But I understand that that can be difficult. But if you
Yeah.
know it needs to be done, like reach out and find, get some support, and
Hmm.
it's just a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And really try to have it that it's just a conversation to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, how about a lighter question?
Yeah.
So it's a twofold question. Do you have a favorite book, or what are you currently reading?
Oh boy. Um, I don't have a favorite book. I'm not one of those like
Mm.
read all the classics kind of
Yeah.
person. Um, and right now I'm like reading non-horse stuff, although everything always affects horses. So
Right. That's cool too. Yeah.
yeah, right now I'm deep into like some of Joe Dispenza's stuff.
Okay.
I'm like
Fantastic.
twirling around in the, no time and no space zone right now.
Yeah. That gets pretty deep. I love
Um,
that.
oh, it's awesome. And
Yeah.
when you change yourself, you change everything. with the
Yeah,
horse.
his online courses are fantastic also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You've gone
cool. Great.
there.
Okay,
Sorry,
let's
it didn't
see, we've
satisfy
got
many
that.
people with that answer, but
Oh, no, no, I think that's great. I think, it's interesting because a lot of times when we get the non-horse book answers, we end up afterwards with a lot of people saying, "Hey, I picked that up and they're right. That's great." So yeah, I think that's
yeah.
fantastic. So, back into tough land. What comes to mind as one of the hardest lessons that you've had to learn in the
Mm.
pursuit of your passion?
Oh, that's a good question.
Mm,
The hardest lessons, um, I will tend to beat myself up a lot if I don't get it right. So I think that the most emotional one is just like you said earlier, you have the bad ride and to not blow it up and quickly
mm.
go like, "That's it, I suck,"
Right?
I just abuse horses for a living.
"I'm gonna go wait tables instead. I can't do this."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the flip side of caring a lot, but that's the thing that I have to, it's just, like, over my years of just the emotional fitness to be able to
Mm,
bring myself back and start to think and take another day, and it's all. That is the emotional part. Um,
yeah.
because and that goes right down to the happy Hadley train scale, the happiness, right? If I
Yeah.
can't do what I need to do to get myself right, even things are hard, to not take it personally if my horse doesn't want to go in the dressage arena. It's like, okay, well that's happening, and now what do we do? I think that's the biggest, most constant, will always be there, and hopefully, I've gotten better at it over the years, um, because that's just the human truth and of what happens when you care. So that's for me. That's the
Yeah.
it affects everything.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the
That's
rest is
great.
just details. If I can arrive like really in my center and be able to like clear my head, the rest is details. But yeah, but lack of emotional fitness can
Yeah,
stop everything right in its tracks.
it sure can. Absolutely. Great, great. What's one thing that you could recommend for riders to work on or to think about to improve their horsemanship or their dressage? I think it's both the same thing, really. This week.
Oh, this week. Um, yeah, I think we said it earlier, is to sit with your horse, like, and to go, what does he need? Like, what does he need to know?
Mm,
And, and actually maybe just what does he need? Just to stop and think about like what are some of the chronic things going on, and think, all right, what's the theme? Like, this my horse needs, like, it's all about motivation. Okay. Or another horse's theme, it's all about relaxation, or it's all about we need to get more coordinated with this thing. So,
mm,
and like I have a progress journal that I made. You can get it in the shop. But it's like every week there's a theme. It's like, okay, this week the theme is fill in the
okay.
blank. And then you can kind of go, all right, how are the different ways I can get this theme done? Like the theme this week is
Mm,
about coordination. It's like, okay, what with something specific, and like, okay, how am I going to do that? So I think just to stop and think a little bit about like, what do you know you need to improve? Even if you have an instructor that's telling you stuff, it's like, what's the little piece inside the piece your instructor's having you do that
mm,
you need to improve?
mhm.
And then can you and your horse as a team just go, okay, how can we get it? I think a lot of times students are just doing what they're told. And of course, that's a good feature in a student. But like, there's
Right.
like, go inside of it and don't just like do the thing, but like, okay, I'm working on serpentines, but every time I go from left to right, I can feel my right thigh does this funny thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna really go there. And between me and my own body, I'm gonna figure this out. So it could be something little like that, or it could be like this week, it's always motivation. It's always motivation with my horse. Like, it's always motivation. Like, okay, it's motivation week. And so pick the one thing. That's
Yeah.
my key to problem solving anything. What's the one thing? Always going to come back to there's one thing.
One thing reminds me of, what was it? City Slickers,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
The one thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll have my students complete the sentence. If only fill in the blank was better, everything would be better. Right,
Mm,
just figure out what that one thing is, and then do a deep dive and like where's all the places that one thing shows up, all the places, and just like get down in there. But there's always a lot of stuff to focus on with horses, so pick one thing.
I like it. That's great.
I want everybody to tell me how they did
Yeah,
because I'm
absolutely. If you're
curious.
listening, enter that in the chat. What's the one thing for you this week? And if you're listening to the replay, you can enter that, I think, in the comment section as well. What's your one thing? And we'll keep checking back on this.
Hmm.
Final question. And I admit that I stole this question. I borrow it. From the podcaster Tim Ferriss. If you had a billboard to print a message big enough for the whole world to see, what would it say?
Never underestimate the possibility for things to improve in ways you cannot yet imagine.
I love
Here,
this. Somebody asked earlier in the
I've got it
chat,
on this pillow.
what does the pillow say? So that's perfect. That's it. I love
You
that.
can go to dressagenaturally.net/merch and get the shirt, the pillow. God, I'm really bad.
That's perfect.
I hate doing stuff
That
like that, but it's just the
right?
truth.
Yeah, I love that. I
You
love
too
that.
can
Say
get a
that
pillow
one for us
like that.
again.
So dressagenaturally.net/merch. You can find it. So
Perfect.
it's a
Perfect.
place where like I make
And
all
what's
these
that message
designs.
one more time?
Huh?
Oh, what's that message one more time?
Oh, never underestimate the possibility for things to improve in ways you cannot yet imagine.
I
And
love it.
yes, I came up with that to try to pull myself out of one of those days where I'm like, "Oh."
One of those emotional days that we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah,
There
so
you go.
that's why I cry under that pillow, and then I go, "Oh, okay." So even
That's
if you can't
great.
even imagine it getting better,
Yeah.
just read the pillow.
Just read the pillow. There you
Just
go. There you go. Oh, that's perfect. Well, Karen, thank you again so much for joining me here for episode 61 of Talking About Horses. It's always great to chat with you. Thank you for being a return guest.
Thank you so much. Like I told you earlier, Patrick, I'm always happy when someone remembers I exist and wants to talk to me. So no, it's I what you do, your heart is so in the right place, and I know you have an amazing community, and
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
so you're one of the lights, the lighthouses in the
Oh,
horse world.
gosh.
So
Thank you. Thank you. It is great, and we're both blessed that we're surrounded by such great people in these communities that we have. It's
yeah,
so fantastic. And to
absolutely.
them we say thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you.